the heads. So we could do it.
I've been told
You don't
that.
want the best part of it?
No, I would do it from this, from the race.
Senator, will please come to order. We left off. Well, first, are there any announcements? Seeing none, that brings us to the orders of the day. And where we were was we were in the midst of debate on H 875, an act relating to the State Ethics Commission and the State Code of Ethics. And the current question, I believe, is shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do we have quorum, first of all?
Do not.
We will pause until we'll have a recess until we attain a quorum. On H 875, an act relating to the State Ethics Commission and the State Code of Ethics. We are continuing our debate from prior to our adjournment. Current question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
Senator from Madison is interrogated as reporter of the bill.
Thank you. I have a few questions, mostly related to the disclosures and just a comment. So the questions are, first one, Mr. President, my understanding is state bonds don't change in value once they're, I should say the market is how bonds change in value once they're in the market. So I'm not sure why that is included in the list, because I think we would want anyone to invest in state and municipal bonds and not discourage that.
Thank you, Mr. President. This municipal and state bonds were included in the list because of the officials that are in question are municipal or state officials. And just to be clear, nothing in the disclosure is to discourage anyone from holding any of these things. It's just that if they do hold a bond or a trust or have a trust or have stocks, that they would disclose what they have in order to have transparency and to ensure that any conflict of interest are divulged. So it's not meant to discourage public officials from having investments. It's just meant to say that if you have an investment over a certain amount, that should be disclosed. And there will be an amendment coming hopefully soon that the senator from Washington and I worked on over the break that would clarify the amount for disclosure for that one would have to have for a municipal or state bond in order to be required to disclose it.
That is helpful, Mr. President. Second question, in that list, and I think a higher threshold would help on this one too, but what's the rationale for including virtual currencies?
I think that the idea of including virtual currencies was just to be up to date with the way that people invest their financial resources in the 21st century, and that financial currencies is another way that people invest, and that it made sense to include that, just like any other kind of stocks or bonds. And there are some types of financial, I don't know a ton about virtual currencies, but my understanding is that they're similar to stocks in that you can have an interest in one and it could go up or down. And if you had insider information about what might be happening with a virtual currency or a bill or a policy that might be enacted that you would have an influence over, it could affect the the value of a virtual currency, especially as you're talking about regulation of these virtual currencies, and whether or not, if you were, the Commissioner of Department of Financial Regulation, that could be a conflict in your role as a regulator, and so you would want that disclosed. So I think it's mostly just to be as modern in our list of potential types of investments as possible.
Thank you. And then real estate, we talked about some, and I see much more likelihood of conflicts of interest in real estate holdings. So I'm not suggesting that a government is never able to purchase or lease property from an elected official or I forgot the term that we use. But what's critical is to do it in the right way so that there's disclosure and the person would recuse themselves from voting. But I think there needs to be some acknowledgement of the importance of real estate, because that's where folks have gotten into trouble. So to make this a question, are you open to including real estate at some level in the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I would answer that by saying that I believe that real estate is included in some level already under current law. So for example, if you look at page 4456, the current requirements for disclosing income would include income from real estate. So if you are a landlord that owns multiple properties and you receive more than $5,000 of income, or you or your spouse or domestic partner receive more than $5,000 annually from the real estate holdings that you have as part of your income, then you would have to disclose that income and the source of that income. So your property management company, your real estate company, your apartment building or whatever would have to be disclosed in that sense. Adding real estate just as an asset it didn't come up in our conversation and didn't come up in the sort of kind of best practice. Nobody suggested it that I can remember until now, to include just real estate holdings that don't generate income. So if they are owned in trust, if you have a real estate trust, that would have to be disclosed in paragraph D of your trust. Or if you had stock holdings in real estate investments, you would have to disclose that. But just that you own property that doesn't generate income didn't come up as something at this point that needed to be disclosed. But and given the concerns about what are already in there, I'm not sure I would want to add something additional at this time, but your point is well taken.
Okay, I thank the senator. And I am supportive of this bill. It's very important that we have disclosure. I do think that we need to balance what we're asking and be very strategic about what's important to list. And then we also would need, I think, a catch-all provision, which might be in the way that we define a conflict, because conflicts will come about that we can't imagine. That's just the nature of the business. But I thank the committee for their work very much.
Before I call another senator, I'd like to just remind the body for a moment, and this is not directed towards any one individual, but it's become more and more of a practice in the debates, particularly with respect to the interrogations and questions. There's a couple aspects that I think are important to remember for the flow and timing, but also to have it work a little better. The purpose of a question is to obtain information and not to supply it to the body. Meaning, when you're asking a question, or another piece of this is, a question may not contain statements of fact unless they be necessary to make the question intelligible and can be authenticated. Neither should a question contain arguments. What that means is, while asking the question, adding sort of points that you're going to make with respect to why you might be for something or against something, or what might be good or what might be bad, that's for your argument after the interrogation. The interrogation time is for questions relating to the bill and the substance of the language in the bill. Thank you. Senator from Chittenden Central.
I want to rise to support this bill, and to thank my committee for all of their work. I don't think it will come as any surprise to any of them, and probably many of you, that I am very passionate about government ethics and accountability. We are standing in a time where there is eroding trust in our institutions, and to me, doing things that clarify conflicts of interest, increase transparency, increase accountability is going to do nothing but build more trust and protect our institutions from false claims about conflicts of interest or false claims about what someone is doing. So for me, this bill is important, not necessarily because there is a lot that is going wrong, but because people believe that there is a lot that is going wrong. And when we open the door and let them see what is happening, we are protecting our institutions. That said, our ethics director testified that over 50% of the complaints that come into the Ethics Commission are about municipal ethics, and there is nothing they can do. And this bill allows them to provide advice, to provide a strengthening of our systems. And I think at this point in time in 2024, when what we're seeing around the country is more and more erosion of public trust, it is absolutely critical that we open the window and let people see the good work that is happening in our municipalities and the good work that people are doing. So I am so supportive of this. I wish it went further, which is what I stand up here and say all the time, but we did really good work to thread the needle to build trust while not overburdening our communities or our candidates. So I want to thank the committee and encourage everyone to support this as not just a municipal ethics and candidate accountability bill, but as a trust building in an institution protecting bill. So thank you.
Senator from Chittenden North.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
Senator from Madison is interrogated.
I really appreciate how much work was done on this bill. As someone who's a big fan of local government, conflicts of interest on page 4479 are a primary concern of mine and some of the friends I have left behind who monitor local government a lot more closely than I do these days. I'm concerned that conflicts of interest are still pretty much self-determined, although this reasonable individual clause makes me wonder, is there someone else who's charged with tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, this is a conflict of interest, or are you solely still leaving it up to the official to determine whether they have a conflict of interest?
Thank you for that question, Mr. President. On that page 4479, and this will also hopefully answer or address some of the concerns of the senator from Essex regarding the recusal process. So it lays out in paragraph B in section 1992 the process for recusing oneself if a conflict of interest is apparent. And I will read, if a municipal officer is confronted with a conflict of interest or the appearance of one, the officer shall immediately recuse themselves from the matter, except as otherwise provided in sections 2 and 5 of the subsection, and not take further action on the matter or participate in any way or act to influence a decision regarding the matter. After recusal, an officer may still take action on the matter if the officer is a party, as defined later in the section, in a contested hearing or litigant, and acts only in the officer's capacity as a member of the public. The officer shall make public statement explaining the officer's recusal. So confronting someone with a conflict of interest is part of the process. So if there's another member of the board, for example, that thinks that another member might have a conflict of interest, they can bring that up in the course of the work of the board, or a member of the public could say, I think that there's a conflict of interest. And then there is a process for determining if there is a conflict of interest. An officer may continue to act in a matter involving the officer's conflict of interest or appearance of a conflict of interest if the officer first, and there's a whole process laid out on page 4480 about determining whether or not recusal is required for a conflict of interest. And this matches or mirrors, it's not exactly the same because of circumstance, but it mirrors what is in state law regarding recusals and conflicts of interest. So the conflict of interest, there's this sort of self-regulation of conflict of interest, saying, to use the example from before, I own stock in Harley Davidson. We're talking about whether to have a contract with Harley Davidson. I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation. Or it could be that another member of the board or the body says, you know, I believe you have a conflict of interest because you own substantial stock in Harley Davidson, so you should recuse yourself. And then there's a process to determine about whether you should recuse yourself. Or a member of the public could also say that in the course of a hearing or a board. So there are multiple ways. It's not just self determination, it's also determination of others who are involved in the conversation.
Thank you, Matt. Ask how you suggest a member of the public receive attention. Should they make a point of order in the course? Because sometimes it's really hard for the public to get called on during the course of a meeting. They've already been heard, during public to be heard. And the select board, for example, is going full steam with their agenda. And they may not be calling on someone from the audience who has a conflict of interest to bring forward.
So at the municipal and the state level, there are ways to make an ethics complaint, which could include a conflict of interest complaint. And each municipality has to lay out their procedure for receiving and dealing with conflicts of interest. And they do so through policy or municipal code. And so the member of the public would have to follow the determination. Generally, having it in writing is probably the most sure way of making sure that it's seen. But there are, in the municipal code of ethics and also in the state code of ethics, ways for members of the public to file complaints regarding ethics. And some of those can be inquiries. So the State Board of Commission of Ethics, if it's not clear whether it's an ethics violation, one can make an inquiry about an ethics violation, and the same can be done at the municipal level. And if the municipality is unsure, they can also consult with the Ethics Commission about the situation.
Thank you, Reporter Bill. This is a huge concern in local governments, not just in my hometown. Research has shown that humans are incapable of noticing their own self conflicts of interest. So I think it's really imperative that all towns, if indeed it's left to them to develop their own policies around a new law like this, just keep in mind that you've got to have some other people who can help call that out and help stand by a member of the public or two that raise those issues. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The gavel will be coming down in a couple of days, and most of the people in this room, I'm sad to not be one of them, but most of the people here will be getting busy on their reelection campaigns. And I'm thinking over the many reelection campaigns I've run, in every one of them, at some point, there would be a candidates forum or a meet the candidates event in which someone would say, you know, I'm running for office because I'm not a politician. I think, okay, you circulated a nominating petition. You got the letter from the authorities and you signed it that you would like your name on the ballot. And you have had signs and pamphlets printed up and you're going around meeting people, but you're not a politician. Now, what would provoke such nonsense? The word politician has become a bad word, that even politicians like to pretend they're not politicians. I remember one politician who actually said, and I'm quoting, "We could really get this country going again if we could just get those Washington politicians out of our way." That was George H.W. Bush, the President of the United States, the world heavyweight champion politician. Why do people hate the idea? Well, first of all, Americans have always had a healthy skepticism about politicians, and good for us, because politicians have power. And politicians write laws, some of which can get people thrown in jail if they break them. Politicians decide, first of all, tax their fellow citizens, and then we decide how to spend their money. I always often joke about that after lunch. I'll say, well, back to spending other people's money. And every now and then I'll see someone from the public look at me angrily. They don't get that I'm joking. Yeah, I know they do. Keeping our noses clean is part of the job, because if the people don't trust their policymakers, politician, polity, they're connected. If the people don't trust the politicians, then you really don't have a democracy. You have the shape of a democracy. You have democratic institutions, but you really don't have democratic government if the people regard the politicians as enemies. And that is getting much worse lately. I mean, we now have people saying that you cannot, we cannot trust the courts. We don't have defendants pleading not guilty. We're going further. We have defendants saying, I'm being persecuted by the court. We don't just have people saying, I think the government is wrong. They're saying the guy who won the last election stole it. And you have millions of people who buy that. We are in a confidence crisis. And the least we can do is to have an orderly system that not only catches the guilty, but vindicates the innocent. That, and I had, and certainly full disclosure, if nothing else, my wife is not a lobbyist, but she works for an organization that deals with policy. And I got to the point where members of the committees I served on finally said, Dick, you can stop with the full disclosure. We know what Cindy does for a living. Because I would just periodically say, you know, my wife works for anything. I think they have something to do with this. Then I had done my duty. The Senate, and we don't do it anymore. Oh, the secretary has stepped out. I think it's Rule 74, but I may have the number wrong. There is a rule in which a senator, first of all, we have to vote on everything. We're not allowed to abstain. The exception being you can ask for permission to abstain from a vote if you have a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest. And the tradition is and I did this once early on, I rose, I asked to be exempted, and then it's voted by the Senate, and there was a unanimous vote, no, including my worst adversaries, looking me in the eye and voting no, meaning you've told us your interest, we trust you. And it was actually a very, and I've seen that happen occasionally. The point being that no one is saying that anyone is evil and needs to be reined in. A conflict of interest is not a character flaw. A conflict of interest is a situation. And people owe it to the public and to their colleagues to state the conflict of interest. Now, we do hear about small towns. There are good things. There's a tissue paper thin separation between a good thing and the bad version of the thing. I have sat down from giving a speech in which I said to myself, good for me, I was articulate. And a friend will come over and say, Dick, you were eloquent. And within a half an hour, I'll have someone come up and say, you pompous ass. It's the same speech. Yes, there are people in small towns where the local guy is going to make a profit on something regarding the town government. But there is something called an old boyocracy. I'm sorry, but there is. And no one's saying we should string the old boys up. Just saying they gotta hold themselves accountable. And so I am going to support this bill, and it's been a long time coming.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to inquire if the amendment, if this would be an appropriate time for me to offer an amendment that is amending the government operations report.
The amendment is in hand. It is slightly inaccurately presented, but we can correct that in that it was an amendment to the bill as opposed to amendment to the report. But if your intention is for it to be an amendment to the report, we can correct that.
Yes.
So would you
It
like
should
to offer
amend
it?
The government operations report.
This is an
I
appropriate time to
apologize.
offer an amendment.
I gave incorrect guidance to the attorney that all is all mine, not his.
There's no need to ascribe fault. I just wanted to let you know it is slightly worded in the motion portion inaccurately, but we will correct that for
Okay.
the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the amendment is being passed out, and this amendment is comes from two things, partly the debate and conversation that we had earlier in the day about this bill and some of the questions that arose. So it's an attempt to clarify some of those things. And then also some of the issues that I believe I mentioned in my report, but that they are outlined in this amendment. So the first instance of amendment is regarding the disclosures of and just to remind everybody that the disclosures happen twice in the bill. They are first for candidates and then for public officials who are in office. So you'll see them also twice in this amendment. So some of these are provided for context, but there is a clarification, and I thank the senator from Washington who worked with me during the break to get some of this language the way that we thought was more clear. So if you today's calendar where the reference is page 4457 at the first time, these are the candidates disclosure. Paragraph 6 is just a lead-in for context, a generalized description, but not amount to the best of the candidate's knowledge of the following investments held by the candidate. A, individual stock holdings valued at 25 or more, which a candidate exercises control over or has the ability to buy or sell, which shall be listed individually. So this is to make it clear that the control is you have the ability to buy or sell. And then interest in investment funds valued at $25,000 or more that a candidate or the candidate's spouse has the ability to exercise control over the composition of assets within the fund. So that is if it's a fund of multiple investments that the candidate has control over the individual components of the fund, the assets in the fund, not over the control over whether they themselves can buy or sell that fund, but whether they have control over the individual assets in the fund. This is for, as I mentioned, funds with multiple assets in it. And then the virtual currencies is the same. The trust funds is the same. The municipal and state bonds, we added, or I, since I'm the sole author of this, but with the consultation with the senator from Washington, bonds of $25,000 or more. This makes it consistent with the other values. And then to allay the concerns of the senator from Rutland related to the lawnmower loan, we added a loan value of $10,000 or more, so that it was clear that if you borrowed $50 from your brother to buy a very old, questionable lawnmower, you would not have to report that. That you'll see twice in this, as I said, for doing both disclosures times. We also clarified, or I clarified the definition of investment fund, which you can find on page 4459. There was some confusion about the definition, which you see in the bill, of widely diversified and how that impacted an investment fund. In talking to our legislative council attorney, he made it clear that this was somewhat anachronistic, I guess, based on the conversations and an earlier draft of the bill from the other body. So getting rid of the definition of widely diversified and deleting it from the definition of investment fund makes it more accurate. So the new definition as proposed in this amendment would be investment fund means a widely held investment fund that is publicly traded, bless you, or available, including a mutual fund, regulated investment company, common trust fund maintained by a bank or similar financial institution, pension or deferred compensation plan, and any other pooled investment fund. So I thought that was a clear definition. The third instance of amendment, again, deletes the widely diversified and has the same definition as it applies again in the bill. And then again, a fourth instance of amendment is for the repeat of the disclosures. The fifth instance of amendment is to get at the concerns raised by the senior senator from Washington about the definition of municipality. In talking with council, CUDs are kind of municipality adjacent. So probably would not have been taken up into would have not been included in the previous definition of municipality. But just to be crystal clear, we included a very clear definition of municipality that means town, village, or city. So it would not include fire districts. Just, I think somebody mentioned fire district in here. At this time, trying to keep it very clear and to not involve, fire districts are often not very sophisticated. So based on all the charters we've done on them, so wanting to make sure that it's town, village, or city, and hopefully that allays the concerns raised about the CUDs. And the sixth instance of an amendment is just this is reorganization in order to change the effective dates in the bill that I mentioned to you before, the enforcement and remedies section. This is for the municipal code of ethics. Each municipality shall adopt by ordinance, rule, or personnel policy procedures for the investigation of complaints that allege a municipal officer has violated the municipal code of ethics and the enforcement in instances of substantiated complaints, including methods of enforcement and available remedies. That would take effect on passage so that towns, cities, and villages could create these methods for enforcement and investigation. And then the actual municipal code of ethics would not take effect until January 1st of 2025. So it would give the town, cities, and villages 6 or 7 months to set up the process, get the people in place, have it all on their website, and do all the things before it would actually take effect. In the eighth instance of amendment, this is just making clarifying and making the initial training to be consistent with the ongoing training and when that is required. And that is the members, as I said, members of legislative bodies and quasi-judicial bodies, chief administrative officers, mayors, town and city managers. Those are the people that have to be trained. Everyone else, they shall make a reasonable effort to train. It showed up in 2 sections of the bill, and we forgot to amend the second section. And then the ninth instance of amendment is just changing the effective dates to delay the effect of the municipal code of ethics, as I have explained now probably multiple times. So that is the amendment offered just by me, and I apologize to the members of my committee who I wasn't able to check in with about this, but it was basically what we discussed earlier and what was discussed on the floor. So that's the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I interrogate the maker, proposer of the amendment?
Senator from Madison.
Just so I am clear, a mutual fund is an investment fund, but it doesn't need to be reported unless it's a special kind of mutual fund in which you have control over what stocks are invested in? And when that's reported, does it need to be reported as Pac Life or Fidelity Investment Fund or mutual fund, or can you just say mutual fund?
Thank you, Mr. President. So the bill and this amendment say a generalized description. So a generalized description is not defined. So I guess I personally would probably say, you know, in my previous example, TIAA CREF mutual fund. But I wouldn't have to disclose that because I can't buy or sell the individual assets in that mutual fund.
That's
So a generalized description is up to the interpretation. It may be also that the Secretary of State provides more guidance in the form about what that means.
when I go to fill out the form, when I get my last 25 signatures, I don't have to write mutual. I've always written IRA or something like that. I don't have to write that because I don't control. I don't even know.
Yes,
I'd have to
so,
go look up.
yes, if you have the ability to exercise control over the composition of assets within the fund, you would have to report it. If you can't do that, you don't have to report it. And also this year, since you mentioned your signatures, you don't have to report it because this doesn't take effect until 2026.
I like to make sure I'm doing things correctly.
I appreciate that, Mr. President, and I would say everybody should just err on the side of caution, but everybody has their own interpretation. Oh, sorry.
I just want to remind folks that if you hold the floor and you're interrogating someone else and you're finished with the interrogation, you would thank them and then sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Senate has a history of having high quality decorum, and I'm doing my best to help you all with maintaining that. The question is, shall the report of the Committee of Government Operations be amended as offered by the Senator from Madison, Senator from Chittenden North?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I'd like to just speak to the fifth instance of amendment, if I may. I'm sorry to see municipality meaning only a town, village, or city. I completely understand that fire districts may be somewhat informally organized. I would rather see them exempted. If we talk about letting communication union districts, which are using hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases of public money, I want to make darn sure that they are not having conflicts of interest within their boards and so forth, and in the decision making that they're doing. Thank you.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would note for the senator that the members of communication union district boards are usually members of individual town select boards, and they themselves would be covered by the municipal code of ethics. That is true also for appointees to other regional boards. They often are members that in their as municipal officials, they're covered by the municipal ethics code, and so therefore would be covered in their other in their capacity as appointees from that municipality as well. We did not receive direct testimony from CUDs and other sort of broader types of local and regional boards, and so I think especially for the start of this, like the decision we made about school boards, we left them out of it and really wanted to focus on the municipal town, cities, and villages, because that's where we were hearing the concerns and complaints were coming from, and that's where our testimony focused. And so I think it's best to keep it as focused as possible at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. We've been at this a long time, and we've been actually at creating an ethics commission and then a statewide code of ethics for quite a long time. The senator from Rutland referred to our early start 5 years ago. And one of the things I treasure about this is that it has been a tripartisan effort. In fact, initially really pushed, we were really pushed to do this by our Republican colleagues. And so one of the things that I've treasured about it is that it's an evolving document and it's an evolving piece of work on our part. And every year we work on adding important things. Anything that is not perfect at the moment, I can promise you, we will address next year, if we're lucky enough to be back here. So I would encourage us to remind us that we will continue to work on perfecting our code of ethics, our ethics commission, and the entire work is something that has just evolved in such a productive and great way. And I would just remind us, as our senator from Chittenden Central reminded us, this is about, and my fellow senior senator from Windsor, this is about public trust and ensuring public trust in public servants, which we all are. It's not about us, it's about what our public wants of us. And with that, thank you. I hope you all will support this terrific bill. And when the vote is taken, I would ask that it be taken by roll.
I will recognize Senator from Rutland momentarily. I just want to ask, are you asking for the amendment vote to be taken by roll? Because we are
Thank
currently.
you, you're right. Thank you. I apologize. Yes, for the final underlying bill.
Senator from Rutland.
So thank you, Mr. President. So I think we all agree that integrity of government officials is critical. I don't think there's anybody in here who would deny that. And I like a lot of the aspects of this bill, but I have a very specific question, so I'm not going to wax philosophically. Obviously, the intent of the bill is to, one of the intents is to avoid the conflict of interest. And I get that. The disclosure of ownership of a company that has business with the state or a municipality, that's completely appropriate. But in the amendment and also in the base bill in section 6A through D, does not have the same, does not repeat the same caveat that the assets revealed have to have a connection with the state or a municipality. And I'm wondering why that linkage is not made. If
Would you
I
like
may
to inquire?
interrogate
The senator from Addison is interrogated as a proposer of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are you inquiring specifically about the trust?
No.
Which, could you repeat
Section
which?
6A through D, which is a variety of stocks, investment funds, virtual currencies, etc.
Just to be clear, that is in the amendment. It is the first instance of amendment.
Oh,
First and fourth. Thanks, Mr. President.
Section 6A through D, whether or not they have a state connection. I think that the reason that this is, it's not always about a connection to the state or the municipality that may cause a conflict of interest. The state or the municipality may be debating policy or contract or consultant relationship or purchasing equipment or purchasing something from a company or for that matter, a nonprofit organization that you might have some kind of financial interest in that either you're employed at or you have stocks with. So again, my wonderful example that the senator from Rutland gave me of Harley Davidson. If, you know, for example, we were trying to do some kind of purchasing agreement with Harley Davidson and someone had a significant amount of stock in Harley Davidson and couldn't actually benefit from the state purchasing a lot of stuff from that company. It's important that financial interests be disclosed publicly in order to reveal that there could be a potential conflict of interest. So that either yourself, you can say, I have a conflict of interest because I own a lot of stock in Harley Davidson, or somebody else might say, hey, I see from your financial disclosure form that you own a lot of stock in Harley Davidson. Maybe you should recuse yourself from this purchasing agreement conversation. So it's not always clear that it's going to have a direct impact on the state, but then it becomes clear later in the context of the discussion, the context of the contract, or the purchasing agreement or whatever it might be. And so for each of these things, they could potentially have an impact on the performance or the duties or the work of a public official.
Well, I thank the reporter. Thank you, Mr. President. In each one of the examples that the reporter just brought up, they have a connection with the state or municipality. So I don't understand why the linkage of A, B, C, and D also don't have the same caveat. But I'm going to go into just a little clarification question for the reporter, if I could interrogate the reporter one more time.
Senator Madison is interrogated again.
Does this information become public?
Yes, the financial disclosure forms for candidates are posted on the Secretary of State's website, and financial disclosure forms for members of the legislature, I believe now are posted. Financial disclosure forms for executive branch is, yes, these are a matter of public record, our financial disclosure forms, with, of course, the redacted information of social security numbers, physical addresses, et cetera.
I thank the reporter. So if an investment has no relationship with the state or the municipality, and if it did in the future, a public official could declare that there was a conflict or they could recuse themselves or such. I find that including every investment that a politician has is a bit expansive and inappropriate. And if there's no conflict of interest, I find this section to essentially feed what I'll term as a personal finance voyeurism and is inappropriate in the setting. So thank you, Mr. President.
If I may, for a moment, unfortunately, I have to remind the senator from Bennington that electronic devices are not allowed to be used during floor debate. Senator from Essex.
Thank you.
I think you're in comfort that you can't take it.
You have a lot of unprotected desk space here at the State House at the moment, so retribution may be possible. Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, speaking on this amendment and speaking to the bill, I don't think that anybody in this room believes that the conflicts of interest should be allowed. But this isn't just what this amendment, it just isn't what the bill is all about neither. This bill asks for so much information that it's going to cause people not to run for office that we already struggle to fill. It already has, and this bill hasn't even passed. I mean, with what the information on the amendment and on the bill that it does, I'm just worried that there's so much information out there that the attacks on people's characters could evolve. I can see attacks on, that person just has way too much. But that's not what bothers me. What bothers me more is that the attack would be that, what does that person have? What has that person done? That person has nothing. That person shouldn't be running for this seat because they haven't accomplished anything. And I just believe that what you have and what you don't have, and as much information as that what this is asking for, is just too much. It's just too much. I mean, if you want to get out there and you want to explain that you have a conflict of something, then so be it. But a lot of where the senator from Rutland has put out, it's just too much information. It's too much information. It's too in depth. But I also think about the people that aren't involved with this process. Unlike my seatmate, who's squealed on himself that his wife fills out this information. A lot of our spouses do, but there are some that don't. There's some that don't care. There's some that don't want to be involved. And to include them into the process of having their information pasted all over the World Wide Web and to be able to be used to be whatever, just isn't where it should be. So it's not about that I don't believe at all, that we shouldn't be willing to disclose any type of conflicts. I differ with the senator from Essex North that people are unable to recognize when they might have a conflict. I'm very, very, very well aware if I've got a conflict, in this building at all times, where it has been said to me that my real estate experience, what I have, is of value to the committee that I chair. I do believe that. I do believe that immensely, the experience and the values that I have. But I also am very, very mindful to make sure that anything that comes up, that it doesn't give me an advantage over anyone else, because I'd be terrible. I feel terrible about that. But the biggest thing is I just don't like the amount of information that can be used against ones to make determinations about whether they are or able to serve in the capacity of the office that they seek. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. This debate has gone on a long time, and I perhaps haven't followed it as closely as I might. But I would like to ask the presenter of the bill a question, and that is, what are we?
Hold on one moment, Senator. Just to be clear, we're debating an amendment that's been handed out on the desk, not the bill. So it might be a slight delay to ask the question.
Okay. So I'll speak to the amendment.
If you'd like to inquire, Senator.
I would.
Senator.
I think it would be helpful. Obviously, we're doing financial reports now, and there are requirements of what we report. Could you just help compare what we already have to do? Because we've had to have that financial disclosure, and we've all hopefully filed the required reports. What it would help me to understand what additional is being required here that is not expected and required of us as statewide candidates now.
Thank you, Mr. President. So under current law, candidates for state office and the legislature are required to disclose each source, but not the amount of personal income over $5,000 for themselves and their spouses and domestic partners. The boards and commissions on which they serve, if the boards and commissions are regulated by law or receive funding from the state, any company on which they or their spouse or domestic partner owns more than 10%, any lease or contract with the state held or entered into by them, their spouse or domestic partner, or any company of which they or their spouse or domestic partner owns 10% or more, and the name and firm of if their spouse or domestic partners are lobbyists. Officials, elected official, candidates for statewide office, also not legislative office, but statewide office, also must submit a partially redacted U.S. individual income tax return form 1040.
Mr. President, just to be clear, that is what we already are required to do.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. President.
And what additional with this as you're proposing? Because obviously spouses are referenced already, ownership is referenced. I'm just wondering if you could clarify, because I have a feeling some of what we're required to do now is getting conflated in this debate. So it would help me understand what additional requirements that you're proposing in this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that question. So the additions are the names of any clients that are regulated or have contracts with the state or municipality. And that is that the candidate or domestic partner knows about. So if it is known to the candidate that the clients of their business are regulated or have contracts with the state, any details of any non-commercially reasonable loans, which we discussed earlier in the debate, ownership in any company that has business with the state or municipality, and investments over $25,000 in stocks, investment funds, virtual currencies, and trusts, and municipal or state bonds or non-commercially reasonable loans. So there's essentially 4 categories of additional information that is required now. Also, the name of your spouse, apparently that wasn't required before, but it is now.
Thank you. I guess that makes reporting a little easier for me. Oh, that was. All right, and thank you. I'm just trying to, I think a lot of what we've heard about kind of mushes together what we're required to do already with what's being added here. So that's why I'm asking the question for clarity. Thank you.
Senator from Franklin County.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I interrogate the reporter of the bill?
Senator from Addison is interrogated as well as the proposer of the amendment.
I have several questions in broad areas that the amendment, as well as the underlying bill, refers to, but they're specific as far as the amendment is concerned. Many of these include requirements that not only the candidate or a person in office fulfill, but it also applies to a spouse or a domestic partner. I can recall we've had a situation here in Vermont back in recent years in which a major candidate partner's spouse declined to provide information, and the candidate as well declined to provide information regarding the finances of that spouse or domestic partner. Is there an issue in which what happens if a person wants to run for office and his or her spouse says, I don't want to give you any financial information, even information that you may have casually picked up by living with me? It's none of their business. What happens?
Thank you for that question, Mr. President. So for the candidate disclosure forms, there are now penalties for failure to complete the forms and submit the forms. If a candidate says, does not fill in all the blanks or says not applicable or refuses to provide information about their spouse, I believe that the State Ethics Commission may be able to take action against that person for failure to comply with the law. However, that's a bit of a gray area, so I'm not sure exactly if they could. I would have to consult with legal counsel if there are blanks left on the form, whether that would be considered not filing the form, or if you could file a completely blank form, or how that would work. It certainly would not be in the spirit of the law, which says you need to provide all this information, and if you don't, then you're in violation. So I think my short answer is I believe that they could enforce the penalties, but I guess I would want to check with counsel to make sure I'm right about that.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question really is to what extent a candidate could, in his or her best efforts, fill the form out completely and in certain sections add the disclaimer that my wife declines to provide the detail regarding his or her finances. And the candidate therefore has complied, but do we prevent a candidate from running for office because his or her spouse or domestic partner declines to cooperate with this request?
I think a candidate who has a spouse or domestic partner in which they're in a legal relationship and share their finances, that spouse or domestic partner, if they have holdings in certain companies, or if they have a financial conflict of interest, that may mean that the candidate or the public official themselves could financially benefit from a decision made or a contract given, or et cetera, then it's really important that that spouse or domestic partner has disclosed their financial holdings. So in terms of what the penalties would be, or what would happen if somebody said no to disclosing it, I don't have the answer. I need to check with counsel. I don't believe that we are saying somebody whose spouse is disagreeing with this policy cannot run for office, but there may be ramifications for that decision.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the reporter indicated earlier in our discussion, and I think it would apply to the amendment as well, that certain officials, particularly judges, for example, in the judiciary, this does not apply to because of the separation of powers, and that there's a disciplinary procedure in the judiciary that covers the ethics of judges. And did I understand that correctly?
Yes, Mr. President. So this bill would cover the two types of judges that are elected in the state of Vermont, probate judges and assistant judges. The disclosure requirement would cover them as in their capacity as candidates. But once they are elected and are members of the judiciary, broadly speaking, they would be covered by the Judicial Conduct Board and the rules of judicial conduct. And therefore, as you mentioned, Mr. President, the separation of powers would mean that they have, the Constitution provides the judiciary with broad authority to regulate and discipline members of the judiciary. So they would be under that code of conduct and the rules of the judiciary. And we did get testimony from the judiciary that that is absolutely the way they want it.
I'm sure. But my question is what happens if you have someone who is currently a probate judge and is running for reelection? And during the course of their candidacy, of course, their background that they're talking about and the finances that they're talking about, which are current, exist for that person who is in fact a member of the judiciary as he or she is running for office. What happens then?
When they are running for office, they are a candidate. And so that they have to comply with the rules of any other candidate. They are not covered by the judiciary rules in their capacity as a candidate. Once they are elected and sworn into office, then they would be covered under the judiciary rules for their duties as a judge. And if you're going to ask the question next about incumbency, if they're an incumbent and they're running, they have to disclose, as any candidate does, because they are a candidate running for office. And so the judiciary may have completely different disclosure requirements. They would have to follow the judiciary ones for when they're in office and the candidate disclosure ones for when they are a candidate.
So a person who is a candidate for re-election to a judicial office, such as a probate judge, is a judge under certain circumstances, and the judiciary's code of conduct applies to him or her, except when they're running for office, and then this particular code of conduct applies to them at the same time?
So the disclosure requirements for the candidates are separate from the requirements of the code of ethics for state officials, which apply to executive state officials. And so when they are a judge, they are under the code of conduct of the judiciary. When they are a candidate, they are required to do the disclosure forms for candidates, just like they are required to get signatures as a candidate and to file with the Secretary of State and to file their campaign finance reports. All of those things they're doing in their capacity as a candidate, and therefore have to follow the laws that any candidate for public office has to follow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I haven't completed my interrogation.
Oh, I'm
yet.
sorry. I'm sorry.
One of the issues that is contained here in the amendment refers to trusts. Increasingly, as a estate planning tool that many people use, is to take real estate and other property that you own during life and place it in a trust, the purpose of which is to avoid probate. So your home, your vacation home, your hunting camp, all may be in the name of a trust. Would those be having to be disclosed according to this? Whereas if you own the same piece of property valued in the same way with the same ownership, if it's in your name as an individual, would not be. So would we be treating real estate and other items that are owned in personal revocable trusts differently for individuals?
This would require interest in trust valued at $25,000 or more. It would disclosure of such. It only requires a generalized description, and you don't have to say how much the trust is valued at, just that it's more than 25,000. If it's less than 25,000, there's disclosure is not required, but a generalized description, but not amount, to the best of the candidate's knowledge of the following, including interests in trusts. Yes, Mr. President.
I thank the reporter. And I thank the chair. Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Government Operations be amended as offered by the Senator from Addison? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. You have amended the report of the Committee on Government Operations as offered by the Senator from Addison. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered? Shall the report of the Committee on Government Operation as amended be adopted? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate. Now would be the time to ask for a roll because it would be appropriate, but the earlier one had been on the wrong question.
Thank you. I asked that when the vote be taken, that it be taken by roll.
And again, further, well, it's your decision when you want to do that. So you can do that now or on the bill. It's up to you.
Roll call, please.
Roll call's been requested. Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter?
The senator from Addison is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a number of times we talked about candidates that are doing business with companies. I don't see anywhere in this bill where they say deal business with nonprofits and that affect the state of Vermont. Did I miss that?
So there is a general requirement that you have to, that a candidate or a public official needs to reveal the source of personal income. So for example, in my example of myself, I would reveal that I have some personal income from Middlebury College, which is a nonprofit organization. So it applies to nonprofit organizations. And then if you are engaged with a board, that's under current law. If you have to, if you're a member of a board, you have to reveal that you're a member of a board. So if you're a member of a nonprofit organization's board, you would have to, any board or commission or entity that is regulated by law.
That's the way it is right now.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep, that a board. And then also, if you have, if the nonprofit organization which you're employed has any clients whose principal business or activities are regulated by the state or municipality, or has a contract with the state or municipality. So in those senses, nonprofit, your relationship or one's relationship with a nonprofit organization would be would need to be disclosed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So if you contribute to a nonprofit, do you have to disclose that?
Mr. President, do you mean make a donation to a nonprofit?
Significant donation for a lot of these nonprofits come to the General Assembly looking for funding. Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest?
If there is not a requirement for disclosing contributions to nonprofit organizations, there are for statewide candidates, disclosing your tax returns might include, depending on the amounts, might include disclosure of some of the profit charitable donations, but only in that context, Mr. President.
Thank you, reporter. Thank you, Mr. President. I know one thing, I'm gonna have to hire an accountant because I have a trust. I'm gonna have to, and I don't do my own calculations, so I'm gonna have to hire somebody so I can fill out an application if I want to run for an office. Thank you very much.
Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I interrogate the reporter of the bill, please?
Reporter is interrogated from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm interested in the handling of records of inquiries and complaints. I see in the bill that there are some details regarding certain kinds of disclosures, but I'm unclear on what happens in the event that there is a complaint against a member of this body for unethical conduct. What and at what point is information available to the public? Is, for example, the filing of the complaint itself, the registry of that complaint, a public document?
It is not, Mr. President, when the, a complaint is filed, it is, if it can be filed with the Ethics Commission or directly with the legislature. And the Ethics Commission, if the complaint is for regarding a legislator in the conduct of their legislative business, it would be then forwarded to the legislature, to either the secretary's or the clerk's office, and then it would be handled by the Senate or House Ethics Committees, and would be confidential until a decision that a violation had been made was determined. If there was no decision about a violation, then that would remain confidential. And that the confidentiality rules are also laid out for any investigations or investigations of the board, commission, ethics commission, and also the municipality. The municipality would have to lay out their terms, the way that they would handle complaints in their municipal rules or codes. And so that there are strict confidentiality rules until a certain point in the process.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm aware that the complaints currently go to the body that the member is a member of, the Ethics Committee of that. Is there anything in this bill that references that process of who does what goes to the Ethics Committee and what goes elsewhere? Or is that someplace else?
It's in current law, the process for complaints that, so it may not show up in the entirety in the bill. Let me see if it's in here in its entirety, but it is, let me see if I can. If it's not in the bill because it's in current law, the process. So if a complaint is filed with the Ethics Commission, it would be, and it was regarding a legislator, it would then be forwarded to the legislature to deal with, either to the Senate Secretary's office or to the clerk's office, and then the committees of jurisdiction would handle the ethics complaint. If it's for complaints that are in the course of somebody's duties as a legislator. I'm not sure if that is fully answering your question. I'm sorry, Mr. President, but it's not laid out completely in the bill because it's in current law. If you would like me to get more information, we could take a recess.
Well, the concern that I have is because it is not explicitly stated in the bill, it does result in some confusion. The failure to file policies, for example, appear to be handled, as near as I can tell, by the commission. But in particular, in its investigations, the commission, through its executive director, may investigate public servants for alleged unethical conduct. And so again, it's the clarity of, does this body have the power to investigate state senators and state representatives? Or is that power reserved to the legislature, as it is under the separation of powers concept for judges? I'm just unclear on where one function ends and the other begins, in the way the bill is worded.
Thank you, Mr. President. The State Ethics Commission expansion of their powers would enable them to, if they would have the ability to investigate ethics issues, whether there was a complaint or not. However, for legislators, if they would not be able to investigate legislators in the course of legislative actions. If we are functioning within our legislative duties, voting on bills, working in committees, et cetera, that would be part of our function as legislators in the legislative body, and that would be under the purview of the legislature and the separation of powers, because we have the ability to create and enforce our own rules as the legislature. That remains, and I have a document from the State Ethics Commission that lays this out. It's a memorandum. About sorry, the separation of powers doctrine prohibits any one branch of Vermont government from usurping the core functions of another branch. So if we are functioning in our core function as a legislators, that core function is overseen by the legislative branch, just like the core functions of the judiciary are overseen as the judicial branch. When we are acting as candidates outside of those core functions as a legislator or a judge, or a member of the judicial branch, we would be, that's not our core function as a legislator or a core function as a judge. That is a function as a candidate. So the Ethics Commission and the disclosure requirements that would be required are outside of our core functions, and therefore they would have the authority to enforce those. But as core function of the legislative, core legislative function that must remain inviolable to ensure the continued integrity and independence of that institution. Hopefully that answers your question, Mr. President. The core functions of the legislature, the core functions of the judiciary would continue to be enforced and overseen by those branches of government. If we are stepping outside of our core duties as legislators, as to act as candidates or to act as candidates, then that is not overseen by the legislature.
And is that, Mr. President, something that is included in statute, or is that an opinion by legislative council or some other source?
That is in the current law of the, I believe, of the Code of Ethics, and it is also a doctrine of the Vermont State Constitution, and a doctrine of the, included in our legislative rules and in the judicial conduct rules as well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee of Government Operations as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Bruce,
Yes.
Senator Bray,
Yes.
Senator Brock,
Yes with explanation. Excuse me, no with explanation.
Senator Campion,
No.
Senator Chittenden,
Yes, with explanation.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collmore,
No.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Senator Hewlett, Senator Hardy,
Yes.
Senator Harrison,
Yes.
Senator Hashim,
Yes.
Senator Ingalls,
No.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Senator McDonald,
Yes.
Senator McCormick,
Yes.
Senator Norris,
No.
Senator Pershing,
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale,
Yes.
Senator Sears, no, Senator Starr,
No.
Senator Bihowski,
Yes.
Senator Watson,
Yes.
Senator Weeks,
No.
Senator Weston,
No.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Williams,
No.
Senator Renner,
Yes.
Senator Dooley,
Yes.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 19, those voting nay, no. And you have adopted the report. I will. They did vote no. It's true. But there were 10 of them that did so. And my apologies. I was making sure to do the explanations properly next. But the results, 19 yeas, 10 noes, and you have adopted the report of the Government Operations Committee as amended. Now for the explanation of vote, Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe strongly in ethical oversight, but this bill is confusing, duplicative, intrusive, and not intuitive.
Now for the explanation of vote, Senator from Chittenden South East.
Thank you, Mr. President. To be a public official, one's life must be public. Thank you.
Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 875. Senator from Chittenden Central.
With that, I will move that we recess
Mhm.
until 5 PM. And that is to give committees of conference a chance to work, amendments a chance to be brought forward. And in the case of this debate, I will not ask that we move it through all stages, thinking that perhaps some people may get answers to questions so that when we take it up in the later session, we can have a shorter, more compressed time. So with that said, Mr. President, I would move that pending announcements, we recess until 5 PM.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President, the joint meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy and the Senate Economic Development Committee in room 8 will begin at 3:30.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Institutions Committee Conference will begin at 3:30. Thank you.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education's Committee of Conference on S204 will begin at 2:30.
Senator from Bennington, might you?
3:30. Thank you.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. The members of the GovOps Committee who can meet will do so at 3:30, please. Thank you.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Mr. President, the Conference Committee on Retail Theft will meet at the fall of the gavel in the judiciary.
Any further announcements? With that, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that Senate stand in recess till 5 PM. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess till 5 PM.